13 years of silence. Then one afternoon, my son showed up at my door with his wife, his luggage, and a demand we're moving in. I'm Margaret Hale, 62 years old, a retired school teacher who's finally learned to enjoy quiet mornings and long cups of coffee. After winning the lottery a few years ago, I thought I'd found peace at last. I fixed up my little house on the edge of town, planted roses, and promised myself I'd never again beg anyone to love me. Life had finally gone still until I opened that door. There he was, Kevin, the boy I once thought the sun rose and set upon. He stood on my porch like a stranger dressed in designer clothes, a faint trace of guilt hiding behind his smile. Beside him stood Tessa, his wife, holding a handbag that probably cost more than my first car. They looked like travelers who'd reached their final destination, my front step. He didn't say hello. He said, "As your son, I'm entitled to some of this. We're moving in. You've got all this extra space anyway." I wish I could tell you I shouted or slammed the door or burst into tears, but I didn't. I just stood there holding the edge of the door, feeling 13 years of silence come rushing back like cold air from an open grave. 13 years since he'd last called me mom. 13 years since the wedding invitation that never came. 13 years of birthdays, holidays, and empty chairs. And now there he was, acting like he'd simply taken a long vacation. I smiled the kind of smile that used to make my students stop misbehaving without me saying a word. "Well," I said, steady as granite, "isn't this interesting?" Tessa gave me that brittle, polite smile women use when they expect a scene. She stayed one step behind Kevin, clutching her purse like a shield. Kevin looked confident, too confident the way people look when they've rehearsed something in front of a mirror. I stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. "If you came here for family, you'll find it. If you came here for money, you'll find something else entirely." They hesitated, then wheeled their suitcases inside, trailing the scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. As I closed the door behind them, I felt my heartbeat slow, not from fear, but from clarity. I wasn't the woman he'd walked away from 13 years ago, the one who apologized for existing. I'd spent those years building something stronger than wealth. I'd built myself. So I poured coffee for 3, sat across from the son who once erased me from his life, and smiled again. "Let's talk," I said. "We have a lot of catching up to do." And somewhere deep inside, beneath the shock and the ache, I could already sense it. This reunion wasn't about love. It was about a lesson long overdue, and I was finally ready to teach it. Kevin sat across from me at the kitchen table like nothing had ever happened, like the last 13 years were just a brief misunderstanding. He smiled that awkward, tight-lipped smile he used to give when he'd been caught lying as a kid. Except now he was a grown man and the lie was much bigger. As the coffee steamed between us, I remembered the last time we'd spoken. He was 32, then successful, newly engaged, and embarrassed by the woman who'd raised him. "You make me look small," he'd said. "You hold me back." Those words still hit like a slap even now. I wasn't invited to the wedding. My name disappeared from family gatherings, group chats, and social media. It was like I had died just without the flowers or the closure. I learned to stop checking for photos online, the ones where everyone smiled around tables I was no longer welcome at. I told myself I'd let him go. And maybe in a strange way I had, until he came knocking again. Now here he was in my living room, his designer suitcase parked neatly beside my old rocking chair. His wife Tessa perched on the couch with a rehearsed gentleness that didn't reach her eyes. "Families should take care of each other," she said softly, resting her manicured hand on Kevin's arm. The words hung in the air like cheap perfume, sweet, cloying, and impossible to believe. I could almost hear the calculation behind them. Play nice, get access, secure the bag. I looked at her carefully. 13 years ago, she was the one who'd told Kevin he needed to cut the cord, that independence meant removing anyone who reminded him of where he came from. And now, here she was playing the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law. I leaned back, folded my hands, and smiled the kind of smile that meant trouble. "It's funny," I said slowly. "You disappeared when I was poor and reappeared when I'm rich. That's not family. That's accounting." The silence after that line was delicious. Kevin cleared his throat. Tessa blinked twice, unsure whether to look offended or apologetic. Somewhere between the ticking of the kitchen clock and the rustle of the curtains, I realized something else. This wasn't just my story. It was a story that belonged to every woman who'd ever been made to feel disposable once her usefulness ran out. Every mother who'd been traded for status, convenience, or comfort. They thought I'd be the same woman they left behind, soft, scared, desperate for scraps of affection. But they were wrong. I excused myself, picked up my phone from the counter, and stared at the wallpaper, an old picture of my late husband smiling beside me. For a moment, I could almost hear his voice, gentle but firm. "You don't owe them anything, Maggie." I smiled at the photo and whispered, "This time, I won't apologize for surviving." When I won the lottery, I didn't run out to buy yachts or diamonds. I bought time to learn. I took financial classes online, hired a lawyer, found a trustworthy advisor, and even a private investigator. Because money doesn't change who people are, it simply amplifies it. And I needed to know exactly what kind of people my son and his wife had become. So while Kevin and Tessa were sipping my coffee and pretending to care about rebuilding family, I reached for the yellow folder sitting on the table beside me. I'd been waiting for this moment. You know, I began my voice calm. I've had a lot of free time these past few years. Time to study, time to understand how to protect myself. And while you were on your way here, I took the liberty of learning a few things about you both. Tessa's smile froze mid-air. Kevin shifted in his chair. I opened the folder slowly, letting the silence stretch. Inside was a neat stack of reports, credit statements, and a few photographs. I slid the first page toward them. $280,000 in debt, I said evenly. 3 maxed-out credit cards. A consulting business that hasn't had a paying client in almost a year. And Kevin, there's something else. I looked him straight in the eyes. You're under investigation for corporate fraud. The air in the room changed. Kevin's shoulders stiffened. Tessa's eyes darted to him like she'd just realized he'd left out a few details. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, voice trembling slightly. "Oh, but I think you do." I flipped another page. "See, I have the report from your old partner, Marcus." At the sound of that name, Kevin's head snapped up. Tessa blinked, clearly blindsided. Marcus gave a statement. I continued about how $50,000 went missing from the company account right before you dissolved your partnership. He's been patient, waiting for repayment. But according to this letter, I pulled out the neatly folded document and set it on the coffee table. His patience runs out tomorrow. Tessa reached for the letter, hands shaking. She skimmed the first few lines, then froze. I didn't have to explain further. Marcus has given you until 5 p. Emmy tomorrow to make things right or face charges. Kevin's lips parted, but no sound came out. The man who'd once told me I made him look small was now shrinking right in front of me. "Tell me, Kevin," I said softly, "are you here for forgiveness or for bail money?" The words hung between us like smoke. Tessa pressed a hand to her chest, feigning shock. We had no idea he'd actually... "Please," I interrupted. "Save the performance. I taught drama for 30 years. You'll have to do better than that." The truth was laid bare. Every lie, every manipulation stripped clean by facts and paperwork. Kevin stared down at his hands, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the one who once believed honesty mattered. But the man sitting here, he wanted a bailout, not redemption. I leaned back, folded the folder shut, and rested my hand on it like a gavel. "You didn't come here to rebuild family," I said. "You came here to rebuild your credit score." It was the kind of line that makes an audience cheer, the kind that lands hard because it's true. And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time in 13 years, I wasn't the abandoned mother begging for love. I was the judge, the jury, and the one holding the file that decided their fate. I didn't throw them out. Not yet. After 13 years of silence and 2 hours of lies, I decided to give them one last chance. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed to see if there was even a shred of decency left to save. I closed the yellow folder, folded my hands, and said quietly, "Here's what's going to happen next." Kevin looked up, his face gray and drawn. Tessa sat rigid, her nails digging into the leather armrest. They both knew what was coming, though neither wanted to hear it. "You want help," I said. "Fine, I'll help, but not the way you expect." They exchanged a wary glance. First, I continued, "You both start individual therapy, not couples counseling individual. You need to understand why you became people who lie, manipulate, and cheat the ones who loved you." Kevin opened his mouth to object, but I raised my hand. "Second, you repay every dollar you've stolen or borrowed under false pretenses. Every friend, every relative, every person you conned to keep up appearances. Full restitution." Tessa's lips parted in disbelief. "That could take years." "Good," I said. "Maybe you'll learn something in the process." I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "Third, you get real jobs, not another startup fantasy, not some consulting project that only exists on paper. Actual employment. You work for someone, you earn a paycheck, you rebuild your lives the hard way." The color drained from Kevin's face. "You're talking about years." "I'm talking about accountability," I said. Then I reached into the folder again and pulled out a single check. "I'll loan you $25,000, not a penny more. Half goes to retain a lawyer and settle with Marcus. The other half goes to a legitimate debt counseling program." I placed the check on the table between us. The sound of paper on wood felt heavier than any courtroom verdict. "This is not a gift," I said quietly. "It's a mirror. What you do with it will show me who you really are." Tessa's hands trembled. Kevin's eyes filled with tears, the kind that come not from remorse, but from realizing the game is over. "If you refuse," I added, standing slowly, "I'll send this folder to every relative, every creditor, and every person you've ever lied to. Your story will no longer be yours to control." The clock on the wall began to chime 4 slow, echoing strikes that filled the room. The last light of the afternoon slanted across their faces, catching every trace of fear and regret. "You can choose money," I said, my voice steady. "Or you can choose dignity, but you can't have both." The house fell silent again. Only the ticking clock and their uneven breathing filled the air. And in that stillness, one thought pulsed in my chest like a drumbeat. This time, I wasn't the one who needed saving. The next morning, the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft drip of coffee into the pot. Then the phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen. I already knew who it was. "Mom." Kevin's voice sounded smaller, uncertain, like a man trying to remember how to be a son. "We accept your conditions." I stayed silent for a moment, letting the words settle. Then he added, almost whispering, "If you hadn't won the lottery, I wouldn't have come." There it was, the first honest thing he'd said to me in 13 years. No excuses, no rehearsed sweetness, just truth, raw and uncomfortable. I took a slow breath. "Thank you for being honest," I said. "I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel the weight of guilt pressing through the line. Forgiveness didn't erase the pain, but it loosened something inside me that had been wound too tight for too long. After I hung up, I sat by the kitchen window, the sunlight spilling across the table, and thought about how strange forgiveness really is. It isn't about excusing what someone did or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about freeing yourself from the need for them to understand or apologize or make it right. It's about choosing to live without the burden of their mistakes hanging around your neck. I turned to the camera, the same one that had captured every part of this story, and spoke to the women watching. Forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means you stop letting someone else's choices define your peace. You stop apologizing for surviving. I wasn't the same woman who once cried over empty holidays and unanswered calls. I had built a life that no longer needed anyone's approval to be whole. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had learned to stand on her own terms. 2 years passed. Kevin kept his word. He paid back every dollar one check at a time. Tessa opened a small bakery, and from what I hear, she smiles more these days, less like a mask, more like a person who's finally learned humility. As for me, I still live in this quiet little house. Every morning I make my coffee, open the curtains, and watch the garden bloom again. The air smells like new beginnings. And sometimes when the sun hits the roses just right, I whisper to myself, real wealth isn't in your bank account, it's in your boundaries. If my story reminds you of your own, share it. Because silence protects no one. Like, comment, and follow Real Her Stories, where women speak the truth no matter who it scares. Shh.